Hello. This is the last GDC vlog. I'm now out of San Francisco, in Seattle. It's past midnight. I still have a bit of ear funkiness from the plane, which is annoying. And I had to throw away my toothpaste because it wouldn't be allowed, and I didn't want to bother going back through the line again. So this GDC, actually, let's grab our notes. But this GDC isn't today. I did a bit of going around on the expo floor, and I actually went to more talks than yesterday, around 4. And all of them were career related. It's all career advice. I wasn't sure how good the advice was actually going to be, because career advice tends to be a bit, depending on where you're getting it from. But before that, so to continue my structure, I'll go through the talks first, and then I'll talk about the little bits of networking I did in the morning. So the first seminar was about dealing with bosses. Basically, it explains things like how performance reviews actually work, and how they tend to work, what you should probably do to get promoted. Recommends doing a lot of documentation on your successes, things you need to work on, basically to help motivate yourself and also to genuinely help you work, like improve what you're working on, like for yourself, and help you grow. Good managers should be your advocates. They're going to be talking about them, let them have as much information as they need to do that. It's an okay talk. I don't really have much to say on it off the top of my head. Imposter's Guide to the Game Industry is the second one. This one, an observation I noticed, and something I think I'm like, oh, this is obvious in hindsight, but and it clearly highlights my own privilege here, in that a lot of imposter syndrome, especially in this industry, which is male dominated, as for a recap, it's the idea of you're qualified, you actually have done a number of significant achievements, but you still feel like you don't belong and like you're fake. In an industry that's dominated mostly by men, women seem to feel this especially, because they are, in a sense, being outed. They're treated like an outsider identity that a male-dominated group is not comfortable trying to integrate into the space, or at least might have some spaces might have that issue, which leads to a whole bunch of problems because it exacerbates imposter syndrome. So this talk wasn't about workplace sexism, but workplace sexism kind of hovers through it, because this presenter is speaking from experience of how from as a woman, and how that tied into her own experiences, and so that's how her advice comes from, not for like dealing with sexism in specific, but like from there she gets more general advice, or actually not they, because it's a collective of women. It's 3 women who are doing the presenting. Basically, the main ideas is that imposter syndrome and feeling like there's more that you need to improve, that you can do better, that there's things you haven't done yet, and maybe you're not as good as everybody say you're, is like feeling like you need to improve. That's valid. People trying to actively undermine you and play into your insecurities to put you down, not cool. Don't let them do that. That's like a big one. If someone's actively trying to undermine you, or like, you should take steps to protect yourself and manage in a safe way, as safe as you can. And you should ask yourself, why are you feeling upset, like, when certain things happen? Like, is it because of the new situation? Are you lacking context being this person? Or is something they said actively trying to upset you, or even passively upsetting you? And so managing your frustrations and learning how to deal with that. And both this one and the professional closet, which I'll get to in a second, both highlight finding community. And since imposter syndrome, at least for these talks, highlight the institutional sexism that exists within the industry, but also just ways in which, workplace cultures can make you feel isolated, no matter what. Sometimes you end at your place and the vibe might be off. It's trying to basically give you tools to help deal with that, and that finding community, finding people who will support you and be your ally and hold you up. That's very important. And I highlight that's why stuff like diversity initiatives matter, because then you can actually find people who share your perspective and know what you're at, on a more experiential level. They know where you're at and they can help deal with your specific problems, which is interesting. I find that an interesting thing I personally took for granted. So it was genuinely kind of eye-opening on that level. So it's generally seems pretty solid advice. I haven't tested it, so there's that. But the actual content, it was interesting to see, because it reveals a lot about the industry that needs to be improved, and tech in general. It's an unfortunate situation that is so, to be blunt, sexist, and I hope that changes. And I hope people are willing, and I hope it changes. Speaking of things I hope change and things that have changed, the professional closet on being out in the game industry. This one is exactly what it sounds like. It's about being queer in the game industry, how you manage that, and what you're going to be doing. This talk was meant for both queer people and allies. It's meant for people who are interested in the conversation as well. Mainly, you can tell that because there's a opening bit or near the beginning where he explains a bunch of terms that anyone who has ever paid attention to a conversation about queerness ever should know, like what the closet means, what LGBTQ stands for, the separation between sexual and romantic attraction, stuff like that, which he summarizes. He opens by making the argument, the presenter, Tim Bull, who makes the argument that diversity is important from a business and moral perspective. Moral's obvious, but from a business perspective, it's just, if people feel more comfortable, you get better talent. So you should work on that, because you're going to lose out on people if you don't. And in a world where more people are more comfortable being out and therefore want to be let into space comfortably, that's something you're going to have to deal with, and you need to be prepared for. He's coming at this from the perspective of a bisexual perspective, which that's the whole thing. There's a part where he mentions he has a lot of access to passing privilege. There's a if you don't know anything with the queer community, there's conversations that tend to pit when like people get really snippy into like internal fighting that is kind of biphobic fighting. There's a sort of resentment, belief of bi people being able to have this passing privilege because they can perform straightness by dating someone who is someone of the opposite sex, or gender more specifically, more accurately, which I don't want to get into, and I don't think I'm equipped to actually just talk about it, but I do think that's just something I think about when I hear that, whether intended or not. He's been out for 50% of his career. He's talked about basically dealing with the weird shit people say, how you handle that, how you handle when people say things that are dumb, or when people tokenize, like basically, yeah, you might have experienced this before if you're queer or a minority person, or just like you're like the one person in your group with a specific interest. If you don't, that is the closest comparison. You'll just be treated as the authority on a subject, the subject being queerness or race issues or whatever, which can, in my experience, I think there is being willing to educate. That's fine in interpersonal context to an extent, but if they start demanding a lot more emotional labor from you, that's when things get hairy. Another example also of emotional labor would be like if someone accidentally misgenders and then they make a big deal out of it, like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, can you please forgive me? Like you want, like they feel like they need to be assuaged that they're a good person, and it's just that's a whole thing that you could break down to itself. It's coming at it from this deeply insecure mindset about how they perceive their own allyship, which, that's a whole conversation unto itself that I don't think I have time or energy to really get into. But these are the conversations that show up in this particular talk from a professional perspective. And basically it's just saying things like try to find ways to make the system more inclusive if you can, do the work on your own, do little things you can to try to make people feel comfortable, like normalizing, introducing yourself with pronouns, just so people feel more comfortable doing that if they want to, which can be useful in situations where your identity does not match your gender presentation, or you're still new to transitioning and your perceived identity and your current gender presentation are still not necessarily aligned in the same way. And just avoids presumptions. Also, because if you're gender non-conforming, that can happen too. I found it interesting on seeing the ways in which people would try to handle their queerness within the industry, like testing the waters to see if how people are feeling. One of them was like, one example he gave was like asking someone about RuPaul's Drag Race and seeing what they think of it, and using that as like a small test. For me, I would use JoJo. JoJo is a great way to do that. Yeah, interesting talk. I think it is, again, because this is advice, I can't tell you if it's actually good advice because I haven't tested it, but it was at least interesting advice. It made me think about stuff. In this case, systemic issues within the industry and the ways in which we might and sometimes belittle each other, intentionally or otherwise. The final talk is about starting a career in a post-pandemic world. Basically, the big takeaways I took from this one is you need to have an actual good online presence now. You can't just let your profile sit. You need to actually engage with it. So make a good profile that has like a personality and decorations and looks nice. Make your LinkedIn look nice. Engage in Discord and looking around for jobs. And most importantly, build a portfolio. Actually, you need a portfolio now because you need more online presence. No matter what you do, they're arguing that you need a portfolio, no matter what you do. Which, I think it's hard to argue otherwise because it's just easier to tell if you're qualified if people can look at examples of what you've actually done and not just a GitHub repo, like in my case, or your H2IO page, which doesn't really tell you exactly that much about what you did and your contributions in detail. So make a good portfolio, make it clear, make it concise, make it have mid-level explanations of what you're doing. I need to make a portfolio, so like a real one, and start building it as well with practice projects. There's that one. There's basically, there's also a system for ranking what jobs you want and why you want them and what money they have, and making sure all your priorities are being managed. Just document when you're job searching in general. I've heard that before. And that's it. They talked a bit about burnout as well. I don't have as much to say here. Like with the advice ones, I've said this already, but like, I can't tell you if it's good. I can only say that it made me think. This less so, because it's just, some of it seems true, like the portfolio stuff. Based on my own experience, it would seem like having a portfolio would be really nice, because it would be clearer on what you actually can and can't do. But yeah, that's talks. As for the actual morning, so I went around the expo floor. I managed to get some business cards. Basically, I went over to Imagination, which is a company, it's the company that Tom Hamish, the guy who did the Quaternion talk, he's a part of. I saw it on his business card and realized I saw that logo before. I need to figure out what that company actually does. I'm curious. And so I go over, I learn more, and I find out they do GPUs. They make GPUs, and specifically they also make technology for their GPUs. Like, their GPU that they made actually has a profiler that can profile in real time, which for those who don't do graphics programming, that's really cool. Because most of the time you have, like with Windows Visual Studio, for example, you have to profile, you have to capture it and profile. So like you don't see that information in real time, which is obnoxious. But their stuff's in real time, which is really cool. They're also trying to get ray tracing to work on mobile phones, which is insane. The fact that real-time ray tracing is becoming more standard just shows you how far our technology has come, because that stuff's really expensive computationally, or was, and now it's becoming more viable as we find more tricks and more GPUs and more tools built just for making it. I met with a guy who told me about, I met with two people from Imagination who told me about what they do, and it's like this guy I meet, and I think it was interesting. I think makes, and I'm curious about how it will pan out for them, because they've been interested in ray tracing for some time now. They invested early, and it's going to probably pay off for them. So I'm quite excited for them. I was wandering around. I was going over to Unity to try to pick someone's brain. Then I saw Intercept Games. I applied for a job there earlier, so for that exact reason, I was like, oh, I kind of want to know even more than I already do. I know of the company. I want to know what hypothetically working there would be like. Basically, I was motivated a bit by that. I talked to one of the people there who was a software programmer too, which you might be wondering, that sounds like a vague job title. That's intentional. There's a bunch of job positions you'll see that say software engineer. The reason, apparently, this is the case, I was told, is because if a company doesn't want to tell you, if telling you what the job role would be would give away the game, like the secrets about the game, then they give you a vague job description, and then they go in more detail once they actually you start applying. Or it's a general role that they would move you to a team depending on the work that they think you're be accomplishing at. So it's like a more general, it's like a kind of general bucket of sorts. Do we think you could be useful at this company in any capacity? So that's something that I'm like, okay, good to know. They talked a lot about, I got to talk to that guy a lot about the Kerbal Space Program and, graphics programming and practicing. I got business cards from the artists who stopped by. Both are senior artists. One's environment, one's technical. I spoke with the technical one more because I'm doing graphics programming stuff right now, and that's more relevant to working a technical artist would have more experience working with a graphics programmer. So yeah, they were nice guys. It was nice getting to see them, getting to meet with them. Finally, before I left to go visit, to meet a friend, to meet Sean from the IGDA, I went to the NYU Expo, not NYU, the NYC booth. And this is the first time they're showing up, and they want to promote, basically there's a lot of funding that's being funneled into promoting domestic industries, gaming companies in the state of New York. And there was a lot of booths like this at GDC, where they'll take, say, like Spain or France would have stuff like this, because France in particular does a lot of grants. France and Quebec both do a lot of grant work when it comes to supporting their industries. Montreal became a tech hub because of the Bloc Québécois in the independence movement, because they would help funnel money into supporting the games industry in particular, along with the larger political systems of Quebec and larger technological and economic shifts that were happening. It's a long story. It's quite fascinating. I'd love to go into it sometime. But I talked to AJ, who had a whole bunch of hacky sacks. Oh my god, this is kid shows up, and like they have way too many hacky sacks, and they're just trying to get rid of as many as possible. And he just comes in with his little bag and just takes a whole ton of them and then runs away. He's like, it was amazing. We talked a lot about trying to get funding and the complexity of interconnecting forces when it comes to building new games infrastructure in a state, and how figuring out how the education system should play into it and what they should be doing and how you foster their growth and what about the growth of other things, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Very complicated, difficult task. But I wish the best for New York. It does have a mobile game scene, but not like a PC gaming scene. Something I recommended was finding ways to do things like game jams like NGIT does. Because say or two about NGIT. I think the one thing I felt was good was Global Game Jam. Stuff like Global Game Jam, where we became a site and bring all these people in. I know we don't do that. Most other jams are small because they don't have the same reach as they're not run. They're community completely run by our club. They're not we're not hosting a branch of it like Global Game Jam, which has a more presence and awareness that can advertise itself better. But still, being a physical space to host and bring in community, I think it's so good because we need spaces to actually practice our craft in academia. And NGIT we're trying. You'll have some classes, but that's not enough. You need more opportunities to work with people, more opportunities to work on your collaboration skills, and you're not going to get a lot of them, unfortunately, at NGIT right now. Arguably, in general, I don't know about other colleges in the state. I imagine maybe NYU's better. I don't know. I have a friend who went to NYU. It sounded like he did more collaborative, more specific stuff, but yeah, it's a complicated subject. I actually talked to Sean a little bit about that kind of stuff, interestingly, so it's related. I think there's a long way to go for games education and trying to find ways to get the powers that be to really understand it and work with it properly. That's just, politics. That's just being in any creative field like games or movies. It's about leveraging the political structures that make up our world and getting people who have power and money to understand why the things that you want are actually really good. And often they won't understand. So you have to either convince them or get the bureaucracy to work with you some other way. That's something that's also was clear to me after going talking after yesterday and today. I think it's clear to me. But besides the business cards and taking my really long flight. Well, not that long flight. The flight wasn't long. I just was waiting around a lot because I left really early, even though my flight was late, as in later in the day. Mostly because I was worried about mishaps, which there were a few. And I'm glad I did it, even though I spent a lot of time waiting. Mostly because I wasn't. I think the expo was closed basically by the time I was done with my talk, so I didn't bother trying. to do more stuff there. Again, I think I made a good call in the end. But GDC overall, if I had to sum up my thoughts now, before to end up this last one, I'm very glad I went. I learned so much. I have a lot of things I can do and can start working on, things I can start practicing, like integrating lookup tables and using stuff like height maps, integrating these tools into my toolkit, practicing with them, getting good with them. These are the sorts of things that I want to get better with, and I think I have more tools to do that now. I've met a lot of interesting people who have told me a lot. A lot of people that I could contact now for advice or for help, which that's still something I myself need to get more comfortable with. But like some of these talks, I think I put that more into perspective. Like if I want a job at somewhere, for example, I could just be like, I could just find a recruiter, ask a genuine question, and see how things go from there. Because that's how the networking stuff would usually work out at GDC. You just go somewhere, you go to a booth, you ask genuine questions, and then you end it with giving your business card. So that's what I did. And I think it's a great strategy. You're having a genuine conversation. You're actually curious because you want to know more. You're learning more no matter what. And to top it all off, you've given someone your contact information in case they're interested in you in the conversation you just had. I've definitely met some interesting people through this that I would love to learn more about or get advice from if I need to. So I think this was worth it. I had a lot of fun. There were ups and downs, some scares. But overall, I'm glad I went. I'm genuinely very glad I went. Though it is quite expensive. This was quite an expensive trip, I will admit. So that's it, really. Whether I don't know if I'll make more YouTube videos. I kind of like this sort of off-the-cuff, rambly stuff because I don't have to put a lot of work in editing it. And I think it might be nice to try to take some of my thoughts and shove them into a space without me having to worry about editing it to keep it breezy. But I think if I'm going to do something like an essay, I probably should just write a script and actually make a very simple essay. If I do that, I just need to find a way to keep the workload simple. So who knows if I'll make more videos on this channel, but thank you for watching. Thank you for this little journey, this little record. This is gonna be helpful for me in the future at the very least. Thanks everybody I met. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and good night.